Okay, we'll begin. I'm expecting this to be no longer than 30 minutes, so we'll see how long this goes. Again, once again, a reminder, anybody just joining, you can ask questions with the little menu bar at the bottom of your screen. If you cycle your mouse over it, it should show up if it's kind of hidden, but you'll be able to ask questions as we go along some of the slides. There's no doubt I'm forgetting some things along here, and people have some good questions that maybe I've overlooked. I've done a lot of training for the iPad scanner and hundreds of clinicians of different types, so hopefully we can get a fresh perspective from some people. Otherwise, we'll just go through some of the basics with the scanner. It will help with hopefully new staff that come on board and start using the scanner. Don't forget that on the scanner desktop, we have a little tutorial section that you should be able to access all our training videos. I think I showed this in a lot of your training sessions. They're also available on our YouTube channel, and we can proceed forward with the presentation now. So just kind of a little overview I included in the email of what we'll be kind of going over today. Some of the scanner basics, any sort of helpful tips that usually get kind of overlooked in the scanner training sessions, including problem solving with a lot of phone calls we get regarding the scanner and some problems you may have experienced yourself and how we solve them. The shoe scanning seems to be something that people want to bring up, so we can kind of go through scanning shoes. And reordering orthotics is another thing. We get a lot of questions on what is the proper procedure for reordering a pair of orthotics that had been placed perhaps the year earlier, or maybe just a second pair. Also, tracking your modifications is something I find is important and not to be overlooked when you have an adjustment to make on an orthotic and you need to send it back to the lab. That adjustment form that you guys fill out for us, it's a good idea. We'll go through like what to do with that and how to keep better track of your adjustments and calibrating your scanner as well. We've never discussed calibrating it, but we'll go over what that means in this presentation. Okay, so the scanner basics, this is something everybody has likely already learned. This might be more relevant to some new staff listening to this presentation right now. So I'm just going to go through a few general rules we've highlighted before. In terms of, let's start at the top, I guess. I always tell people one of the most important things to remember is positioning of the scanner. You'll see from the photo of a non-weight bearing scan, always people kind of have it at like a 20-degree angle or don't have it exactly parallel with the foot in non-weight bearing. So we just keep it simple. So tell your staff members and don't forget that whenever you're scanning anything besides a non-weight bearing scan, you're always taking it from a bird's eye view from like right directly over top of the shoe, or if you're scanning both feet in a weight bearing scan, the scanner positioning should be fairly overhanging over top of the image. Otherwise, just look at the right side picture there of the proper way you should scan a foot in non-weight bearing. And if you're noticing the toes getting cut off in your scans, and you're not able to get the forefoot completely highlighted red when you press the set distance button, likely it's not because you're perfectly level with the foot. So either grab a comfy chair and sit down while doing it, or kneel down to that position. You'll remember from initial training sessions, if you attended them, that we always are supposed to start at least an arm length distance away from anything that we scan. There's no exceptions to that rule. Try to just keep in mind when you sit down to do a scan to keep a full arm length distance at least away from the object, from the foot, from the shoe, whatever you're scanning. As well as follow any on-screen instructions. If someone's using the scanner for the first time, we have designed the scanner and the software and such that they can't skip over steps. So if you're ever lost at what to do, someone new, or how to explain what comes first, for instance, setting the distance and getting that box to pop up with the little highlighted color in front of it before you actually can press scan, simply follow those instructions. And it will also, like, you'll note when you're scanning it too, just look on screen. It will actually tell you to slow down if you're moving a little bit too fast. People are either, I find, too slow at scanning and they just fixate on certain points when taking a scan, or they're zipping around really fast. And so if you're going too fast, what we're trying to do is tell people to slow down. It doesn't actually affect the quality of your scans, but you'll find it's just a little easier to spray paint everything white if you do that. The positioning of the foot in a non-weight bearing scan is also important. A lot of people just tell the patient to put their knee up on a chair, and they just put the tip of their kneecap up on the chair and the foot sort of hanging down at a 30-degree angle. Have your patient get comfortable. Push their knee all the way forward on the chair. This is a pretty ideal position here so that that just the foot is sort of hanging off the chair, and it's nice and stable and not incidentally like inverted, or the patient's trying to like look behind them and watch you scan. Just tell them to stand straight forward with their knee up like that while you take the scan, and then you can review the scan with them afterwards. Generally what I'm doing is scanning the foot in non-weight bearing and then showing the patient, if they come in saying they have flat feet, for instance, you take a scan of them there, you show them that there is some arch, generally there is some arch contour there, unless it's a congenital pes planus or something. We would really just show them like their foot in a non-weight bearing position, which is actually the position that we make the actual scan orthotics from, that non-weight bearing impression. The weight bearing impression simply shows us like splaying of the foot and elongation of the foot and subtalar joint alignment as well to those regards, but it's definitely not the scan the most important scan. The non-weight bearing is always your most important scan that you'll be taking. If you mess up a scan, you'll guys notice when you press start scanning and it starts spray painting everything white. Again, if you look at the side of the screen, you'll be kind of able to see I don't know if you'll be able to see my mouse here, but you'll be able to see this back button above the stop button, which you're all, I'm sure, aware of by now. But that if you press that, it will simply take you back to the very first step, and you can retake your scan if your finger got over top of the camera or something sort of messed up when you took a scan. And we'll go into some of that too in a bit. Okay, so we'll move on to a few helpful tips, which I'm sure a lot of you are here for. Everybody is likely in attendance here have the basics kind of in place by now, we hope. If not, again, you can always call me and we can always do kind of a refresher session. But let's go through a few things that generally we don't cover in the first training session and are just kind of good to know type stuff with the iPad scanner. The first one being that little plus button there. You've seen me kind of take photos and we add additional scans and photos on that. One of the more common ones, photos we do take, you don't need to kind of send us photos of 5 different angles. A simple non-weight bearing and weight bearing photo is actually can be even more helpful than a weight bearing scan in some regards, that we're not looking at this 3D rendered file. We're looking at actual like a high definition color photo of the feet. And identifying, like posteriorly, for example, identifying crease marks and determining forefoot varus and valgus deformations from the rear foot, stuff like that as well from the forefoot. I would say that 3D scans of removable insoles would probably be another 3D scan that you can add. I can't really think of many other times you would add an actual 3D scan other than an insole of a shoe itself, or perhaps someone's old orthotics that they've worn in the past. There'll be times patients want us to replicate that old orthotic. So, you can flip the orthotic upside down and scan it upside down like you would an actual prefab insole from a shoe, and then you can turn it right side up to scan the top side if we're looking to replicate a pair of orthotics. In that case, I wouldn't find it necessary to take 3D scans of the foot in the non-weight bearing and weight bearing positions if we're just replicating a device. Pictures of the shoes are also very helpful too. I know you'll take a 3D scan of the shoe or a 3D scan of the insole, but pictures of shoes are also helpful. And of course, when you're setting to do a non-weight bearing scan, when you have them in that position in full view of the plantar aspect of the foot, take a photo before you take a scan. That's one recommendation I usually try to make in my training sessions, is that zoom in, make sure you get kind of close, don't take a photo like 3 feet away, get kind of close to the foot, and you can actually have the patient point to exact points of pain as well while you're doing your initial assessment, so that you can either document this for yourself or something relevant for the lab to see. The scanning tips, again, I always say try and be seated. A lot of you have those comfy little swivel chair stools that you can use. Have a seat on one of those, and it lets you kind of move around the foot freely and a little bit more comfortable. Your weight-bearing scans, I know some of you work in tight quarters, so just if you can't have enough space in the room to kind of maneuver around the patient to scan their rear foot, the tip I would say is just scan one of the feet. Focus on the right or left foot and just try and get like 80% of that if you can. Something is better than nothing. We've been making orthotics for years without weight-bearing scans. It's simply just a helpful scan in this case to see how much that foot sort of splays and elongates there. But anyways, moving on. Moving slowly during weight-bearing scans. That's another thing. People seem to think they can move as fast as they do. The non-weight-bearing scans are obviously the fastest. They should take you less than 10 seconds to do. If it's taking you longer than that, give me a call. There's something you may be positioning wise, but once something essentially turns spray painted white on screen, then you should know that it's time to move around. Again, I tell everybody, just picture the iPad like a digital spray paint can. And if you're trying to scan that foot, you would be essentially going at almost the same speeds as if you were trying to spray paint it. So if that helps, picture it that way, and you'll be able to hopefully improve the speed of your scans as well. Now, when you're doing weight-bearing scans, I also tell people, scan as much as you can from the front. When we're doing the full weight-bearing scan, that third and final scan, which we usually use to compare with the non-weight-bearing scans to show them how the foot changes shape, and that we take into account that change when designing our orthotics, it helps just to, instead of circling around them 2 or 3 times, and you can scan about 90% of the foot from the very front, from a seated position, pointing at both their feet. Bringing the iPad, I almost say like a sunset, bringing it down from the left lateral side to the right to the ground, and then again to the medial side. You can notice that the foot completely highlights white, and at that point you only need to get up to kind of maneuver around behind to scan them posteriorly, which will be a lot faster. And that's one thing I always recommend, because the weight-bearing scans seem to be the most challenging scans, understandably so, given like some of the spaces you're trying to take those scans in. But just know that it's not as important as a scan as a non-weight-bearing scan, and don't get fixated on these little spots which don't tend to spray paint white, these stubborn little areas that you try keep holding the scanner still there, and you try at a different position and it's still not turning white. A scan can be missing small bits and will be perfectly acceptable to the lab. And let's see here. We'll move to the quick. I have a few more tips on the next slide here that I wanted to recommend in terms of shoe sizes. Again, if you have any questions, you can always ask them. I likely will be covering some of your questions as we skip ahead to the other slides, but I will answer them during the presentation or afterwards. You can just simply type in the chat box there your question, and feel free to do that. The shoe sizes, you'll notice when creating a patient file, lots of people don't know the Brannick scale. Like the Brannick scale is gender neutral. A lot of people forget the male and female button when they're creating a file. So a 39 is going to be a 39 in a man or woman's shoe. And if you don't know and you can't lift up the tongue of the shoe to see what the EU or UK size is that they wear, and don't get me wrong, this is really important, since all patients will wear either tighter or looser fitting shoes in half sizes too big or half sizes too small. It's not necessary that you scan shoes. It never has been necessary that you send us shoe scans or shoe impressions or the shoes themselves. But it certainly will help if you can tell us that. And if you don't know that Euro size, then again, I'm getting to the point here is putting the size down in the patient notes you'll see there. Just leaving it at the default 39 is fine. We always go by the size in the patient notes box. So what to include in the patient notes section? Besides, obvious things we include in notes in our patient files, I would say maybe include some of the, in the prescription form, which is going to be a whole other webinar, is going through that prescription form and filling out prescription and what to fill out and how to use the at lab discretion button. But for now, if you do remember your actual, the first basic info section of the prescription form will prompt you for one of the mandatory requirements when sending in a file, regardless if it's a quick order or not. It's what the primary shoes your patients are wearing the orthotics in. And again, footwear is going to be a whole other webinar as well, as that's just as equally important as the actual scans themselves in some cases. But if they want to wear them in multiple shoe types, as long as they're fitting a certain type of shoe, like a casual walking shoe, runner sort of fall in the same category. When you're choosing shoe styles in the prescription form, that's going to indicate usually how thick we make the orthotics. UVA can be thick or it can be really thin. If you're choosing dress shoes, know that they're going to get a slimmer fitting, narrower, lower profile device. And if they want to fit them in multiple shoes, that's equally as important too. If you just choose in the prescription form for runners and they have the expectations that they're also going to try to fit them in like these thin, narrow Pumas or Lacoste, like I would find that I would put those notes down in the prescription form of secondary shoe types. Hopefully we're educating our patients on their expectations of what an orthotic fits in. But, if they're wearing a size 8.5 shoe, likely that insert's going to be fairly interchangeable among all their other brands of similar type shoes that they wear them in, if it was just, let's say, a running or casual shoe. If their orthotic history as well is helpful, if they've ever worn orthotics or not. I put that in my notes. Patient expectations in terms of the actual, I guess I should elaborate on that. The orthotics themselves, what purpose are they wearing them for? Are they walking in them? Are they training in them? If they're an avid runner and they're putting 5K on their orthotics, every day or something, then we would like to kind of know that, because if you're choosing at lab discretion, obviously if you choose that for the top cover, we want to choose like a runner's top cover. And again, I'm sorry, I would love to cover all this stuff on top covers, but it would just be too long. And, we're on a timeline here to get through the scanning. Missing top cover choices. Yes, there are not all. You'll notice probably by now that some of the top covers they choose, like Luna, maybe not Luna Elastics, but there's hydrofill top covers on your top cover rings, and we'll be adding new top covers, and they may not get updated in the prescription form. So simply just choose that lab discretion in the prescription form and write down the actual top cover if you can't seem to find it in the actual order info. And there'll be times that you need they're leaving on vacation, and instead of calling into the lab and letting us know, you can just write in the patient notes when you need the orthotics actually delivered by. Just as important when you're placing rush orders. Some people don't factor in the actual shipping time and will, be under the impression orthotics are coming tomorrow when they're actually not coming until Friday. And people always wonder if they are taking good quality scans. Know first and foremost that the lab will contact you if you send us some scans which we can't actually make an orthotic from. So rest assured that, if you're not hearing anything back from us, no news is good news in that case. You can view the orthotic in different, I'm sure everybody knows this by now, but when you press stop scanning, it takes you to a review of your actual scan. And this actually reminds me of something else in terms of like when you're viewing your scan and you're rotating it on screen. Sometimes you can't like rotate it in the center of the screen. It's kind of annoying. It's in like the upper left corner. Use both your fingers at the same time, 2 fingers, to drag down the foot or shoe scan down to the bottom of the screen or the center of the screen, something that's you can see the entire image with. A lot of people are trying to like rotate them with 1 finger. So mess around when you press the stop scanning button. And this is really the only time you can review this scan in a full color or shaded view. You'll notice the different views. And certain views are, elaborating on the second point here, viewing it in shaded mode is sometimes a little bit easier to identify chunks and bits you've missed, like major chunks, as opposed to that X-ray mesh mode that you immediately see when you press the stop button. So, hopefully those are some useful tips to know when, showing the patient and reviewing the scan before you press save. Because you notice after you press save scan, it turns it into a 3D rendered file, kind of weird looking, not like as detailed looking and as large as the original scans you took, because it's already compressed the file and condensed it down to a small 3D file that will be ready to ship to the lab and have our modeling team start working from. So just keep that in mind to always review it before pressing save with the patient. Okay, so some problem solving quickly here. We're doing all right for time. Some common things we'll run through. You'll see the old dreaded "please connect scanner structure sensor" white screen sometimes. That message usually is you receive with the obvious thing is that the scanner isn't charged, and perhaps you thought it was charged, or you plugged it in at night, and you can see whenever your scanner's charging by a flashing or solid orange light on the front of the scanner when it's plugged in. Other times when people call me and say that they're getting that, I ask them to first unplug and replug the cord from the iPad. That's probably something everybody tries instinctively after when they see that. If that doesn't work, I always would say, if you recall calling me ever with this problem, to do a hard reset of the iPad. The iPad essentially is like a desktop computer. It will need to be reset from time to time, or if you just did an update or something. So hold down the power button, which is underneath the scanner bracket, and the home button simultaneously. Hold both those buttons down for at least 5 seconds. You got to keep holding it until it shuts off, and that just resets the entire scanner, not your data, but simply just does a restart and starts up your system again. And hopefully, I find 90% of the time that's what solves that "please connect structure sensor" button or notification. Even though the scanner is like clearly plugged into the iPad, it just won't activate the scanner. So so just check and make sure that it's plugged in when you're doing it. And sometimes you have to really kind of push that AC adapter in the scanner, and if you just kind of lightly push it in, it might not be pushed in fully. So we'll move on. Image attachment. Okay, so a lot of you, when you're taking scans, you will see, you'll be scanning something, and if you look in the bottom right, this is the best way to describe it, and I just call it image detachment, because you're just sitting there scanning, and that white highlighted color simply sort of separates from what you're trying to scan. Another good feature of the scanner is it's always fairly obvious when something messes up on screen. It just doesn't look right. It doesn't look like something shifted, or just doesn't seem like it's spray painting right. A number of different causes for that, which, if you remember back to the training session, the most common time it does occur, that you'll probably notice as well, is your weight-bearing scans, because we're standing on different surfaces, whether hardwood, carpeting, and different patterns. We haven't figured out why exactly which patterns cause this, but certain floors it's no problems. A lot of you have never experienced problems taking your weight-bearing scans, and others you've done everything right. Your positioning and movement of the scanner is correct, and you're not going too fast, and it just for no reason will do this in the bottom screen. So just keep in mind that some of those causes are that, yes, you could be moving too fast, highly unlikely. You'll notice you can scan pretty fast with these things and not get it to do that. More likely that the background, try putting them on a different textured color background, lay some paper down on the ground, go to a dollar store and pick up a black mat or something to have your patients stand on if you don't have any flooring. That seems to work in the office. But it's just, if you're getting that in that case, then it's unfortunate that just the carpeting you have in your office or the flooring is causing it to kind of get confused when it's trying to scan something on the floor. The same would go with shoes. If the scanner cannot see something on screen, like if you're scanning in weight bearing and you move away so that the scanner is not focused on the foot or the shoe, sometimes it can't recover, and you go back to scanning the feet, and it again looks like this. So you have that little back arrow button there to go ahead and retake your scan. you get too close to the leg. That's another problem people have, is when they're doing a weight-bearing scan and they get up to go around the patient, the scanner is often too close to the leg, and it can no longer view the scanner can no longer see the 2 feet. So make a note when you do your weight-bearing scans, back up a little and keep the feet in view of the camera at all times. Just look at the screen and you'll see if the feet are going off the screen there. The iPad's camera is being used in unison with the 3D scanner, so it's important that both those things stay trained on whatever's in that box on screen. Okay, reordering orthotics. We are going to have an update soon to make this a lot more easier, but what we usually tell people right now is to open up a patient file. You will select view previous orders under your patient notes there, and that will be, a sort of database of all the orders you submitted to our lab. And if you select an old order and pull it up, you'll notice all the scans will and photos, everything basically that you sent in from the last order will appear on screen. So you can just go in and go into the order form directly from there, unless you feel it's necessary to rescan them or rescan a shoe or something like that, or a new shoe, I should say, for that matter. You can just change some things in the prescription forms, just anything to do with like the shoe type. Perhaps it's for a different shoe this time, or if it's just the exact same style of orthotic again. You can indicate that at the notes at the end of the prescription form under the lab order notes or your patient notes that this is a reorder. Sometimes we don't always catch it if it's a reorder. You send it in as it's like almost like a new order, and we just didn't search the name right to identify that this was a reorder. We have no system in the back end in place that flags it immediately as a reorder. So we are relying on you guys to hopefully give us just a heads up that it's a reorder. And any sort of changes that you want to make to the top cover can then be just changed directly from the prescription form before essentially resubmitting it in as a new scan again. Hopefully that's clear. Or just option B is just to call us. Our info, you'll note, is hopefully on your desktop, on your sort of wallpaper background of your iPad. We always tell people to just email support@orthogeniclab.com or give us a quick call and just let us know you want to place a reorder for the same patient. And the girls are usually good at just processing that immediately. I personally like to just send in the file so I have my own records. The last time we submitted an order and what it was kind of listed chronologically for me as I open those previous orders. Calibrating the scanner. Okay, so it has been a while. Some of you have probably had these scanners for a few years now. You'll notice if you take the scanner bracket off the iPad and remove it from the iPad completely and put it back on, when you go to take a scan and you press that set distance button, that highlighted color isn't usually, sometimes it can be shifted left, down, up, right. It doesn't seem to be directly over the foot. The good news is that you haven't been taking bad scans. This is just something that gives the user, the clinician, feedback on what the scanner is actually trained on. It's showing as it's slightly shifted. So it's going to scan a foot normally. It's going to scan the exact details. It's not going to throw anything off. But if it's annoying, like it is for me personally, if I notice that I took my scanner off and now it's doing this, the left-hand side is a sort of screenshot of the Calibrator app. I have seen some scanners pretty bad in terms of like that alignment there. And if you just want to get it back so that it's completely hovered over the foot or anything you're scanning, then open the Calibrator app. It will give you really clear instructions how to recalibrate your scanner. You'll need to be sort of around a desktop or with a lot of things on it, objects for it to kind of fixate on and recalibrate itself. Keep that in mind. If you're having difficulty with this, I best advise just give me a call and I'll talk you through it. But it actually takes you through step-by-step instructions how to recalibrate your scanner and fix that annoying little problem there. Orthotic modifications or adjustments, whatever you want to call them. They're a good idea to, when you send us in one, if you've had a patient that has worn them for, our usual 3 to 4 weeks, I usually tell my patients of frequent wear and something still maybe bothering them or uncomfortable, you're filling out that adjustment form. If you don't have that form, by the way, just drop me an email and ask for it. It was sent out with your original email package with a bunch of helpful files. If you need those again, just give me a quick email and I'd be happy to send these kind of forms back out. They are helpful. We don't get a lot of adjustments in, so we're taking that as a good sign that our orthotics are quite compliant with footwear. But when you fill them out, just take a picture of the adjustment form and add it to the patient file. You'll find that that's an easy way to kind of keep track. Once you start building up large databases of patient files, this is just good for your own record keeping to snap a photo of that in the patient file, so you know like what was requested and exactly what was likely being done. You can always call the lab too afterwards, and you'll get an explanation to kind of include in the patient notes. I always record all my modifications in there, and just even for reorder purposes too, right? If we remake that exact same problem with that exact same orthotic with the exact same problem, you're just going to end up sending it back for the same adjustment, and the patient will know immediately as soon as they put it on that arch reduction from their old pair wasn't added to the new pair that they reordered with you. So that's a good idea that I usually recommend to clinics. And how about that? 30 minutes exactly. I'm going to stop recording this shortly. There are no doubt a lot of spin-off questions regarding some of this material, but I hope this is a good video webinar that will be, you can be passed on to your staff. And if you have assistants even who take the scans for you, you'll notice that, you no longer need to be so concerned with positioning and correcting the foot manually. Hopefully we've showed you a demo of our software we use to design our orthotics. If not, by all means, we'll be setting up another webinar for that. And, you can have assistants use the scanner to kind of take the actual scans of the feet, or if they bring in a pair of shoes later and want their shoes scanned, something like that. This can be easily trained with any staff members or assistants on staff. And the scanners are quite intuitive and easy to use. So as you probably found already, and at this point, thank you all for attending. I'm going to stop recording and I will open up for any live Q&A.